Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Ross Kay, home ownership consultant from thewealthyhomeowner.ca. Welcome back to the show, Ross.
Thanks for having me on, Jim.
Ross, we love to get listener questions, and we'll answer some today. Ross, with Vancouver Realtors releasing their October stats today, we have a timely question from Colette from Vancouver. Ross has stated that the Vancouver housing market is in a correction, but the listing prices seem to be getting higher and higher every year, in particular condos. Are condominiums doing better than houses?
No, and Colette, what you're stating really is why there's always so much confusion about housing markets. So it sounds like from your question that you're saying that listing prices seems to be getting higher and higher. Okay. So what I would say to you is you're probably not looking at the same listing prices over and over and over again, like the same home being listed at a different price point. Okay, so you're probably not aware that the housing market in Vancouver has been actually correcting since 2016. This is not really even a debatable subject from the way that we measure things, but the way everybody else does, I can understand. Now, the condo sector, that's been correcting on a little bit different pace, because I think they were, what are we here? February of 2018. In February of 2018, okay, 3 years ago, the average condo apartment buyer who was working with a real estate agent from the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver was paying $750,000 on average that month. Okay, here we are now in the fall of 2021, over 3 years later, and they're only paying $747,000 on average. So even just on that singular data point, okay, of that 1 month comparison, you're looking at prices really being unchanged over that period of time. What that also hides from you, though, is the quality of the condo that is being purchased, because people are acquiring a higher quality condo at $474,000 in October of 2021 than they were in February of 2018. Okay? That's where the confusion lies. Organized real estate and the sales, the trade associations for salespeople relies upon you looking at realtor.ca and not understanding how the housing market functions. I am sure today that you are not going to hear one report out there that the average home buyer average condominium apartment home buyer in February of 2018 was spending the same price as what's being spent today. Just inflation alone wipes out 6% of that valuation change. Well, it's actually more than that, right? So then you also have to take into consideration, well, look how low the mortgage rates are right now. We're talking about people buying a property of such a substantially higher quality by paying the exact same amount of money because they have lower carrying costs. That's, Colette, what you're not seeing when you hear about these, the report that would have been released today. I mean, no one would have told you today that the share of sales going to single detached homes was off by 300, right? Like there's 300 fewer single detached homes that were purchased, not 300, what is it? 250? 250, basically 250 fewer single detached were reported as sold by members of the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver in October than there was the previous October. But condominium apartments, those sales increased by 230. You just don't hear these kind of comments from your local real estate board or your local real estate salesman. Okay, because remember, they're salespeople. The only way they can make money is selling you something. Okay, so the average price being spent by a home buyer buying the exact identical home is lower now than it was in 2016. I don't care what anybody else says. This is what the data shows, and I just showed you how it gets confusing. Single detached homes had a correction on substantially earlier, back in 2016, beginning in 2016. Your townhouses, they went through their correction, I think the end of 2017 it started, and then early 2018 is when your condominium apartments correction started. Now, you also have to wonder if that's true. If what I'm telling you is true, then why does the so what would that be, Jim? We're looking at 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So what's that? That's 5 years. That's 5 years. Why are they saying that single detached homes with the benchmark price is increased by 36% over those 5 years? Why are they saying that? Why is not one of their members coming out and saying, hey, wait a second, this isn't true? I mean, they were saying prices were up year over year in the lower mainland, let's just use Greater Vancouver. They were up 20% 3 years ago. What are you talking about? House prices had dropped. They're saying that they're up 20% from just a year ago. So they were up 22% 3 years ago and only up 20% a year ago. So where's all this moving around of numbers happening? They also don't tell you, because in where you're talking about, they don't actually produce an MLS average price for the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver. So you can get an MLS average price in every other province of this country, but you can't get one in British Columbia. Why? Why does the Real Estate Board of Vancouver come out with a press release today, basically 24 hours into a new month, and the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board didn't release today? Why are you counting sales 1 day in a new month for October when your realtors have until Friday to report the sales that took place in October? They have till this Friday in the Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver to report the sales that took place in October. Now, if you're a good, smart listing agent, if you're a real estate salesperson who's really good at your business, you're not going to report those October sales until Friday, because that gives you 5 more days to market your proficiency as a listing agent to all the neighbors around the house that you just sold without any of your competitors knowing what the house sold for, or even knowing that it's firmed up and is sold. So that gives you a whole week to knock on all the neighbors' doors and see if anybody else wants to sell because you just sold their neighbor's house. So this is another case in point. So when you hear the numbers that sales increase in September, in October, but they were down in September. Well, that's just because of the way the number of reporting days roll out in calendar year 2021. The best example for you to look at, really, if you want to see this, is Calgary. We've told you on the show since 2018, Calgary is the real MLS system to watch because everything that we tell you is proven true on that MLS system, and it's down almost to the house. You can see it. So the average condominium is worth less today in Greater Vancouver than it was in the spring of 2018. This is not debatable, okay? You can argue it, but it's an argument that you'll lose because the data shows that they're less. They're not a lot less, okay? Also, you need to understand that what condominium apartment is being purchased is a higher quality apartment in the fall of 2021 than it was in the spring of 2018. You're getting more house for your money. You're paying less per month because interest rates have dropped. and the actual value of the property you're acquiring is lower. All at the same time, your local real estate board is claiming condo prices, apartments in Greater Vancouver over the last 5 years have gone up 39% in value. Their average price didn't. Their own charts published. They published the average price for each individual, for a single detached, attached homes, and condo apartments. So that didn't go up 39%, but that magic benchmark did. And there's your problem.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Ross Ali asks, Scotiabank is stating home sales rose in September, and Mr. Kay said they declined. Scotiabank says prices are going to go higher, and Mr. Kay says they're falling. Now Scotia is saying a possible 6-month rate increase is possible in the next 2 years, or another possible 6 mortgage rate increases. Holy cow, not just 1, but 6 in 2 years. Well, what does Mr. Kay say about that?
I say that those people that you quoted, Scotiabank Economics team, they're real estate lending experts who were cited in that report, don't have any understanding of what they're actually saying, okay? They take whatever organized real estate tells them, and they repeat it as if it's the truth, okay? So this is the perspective that we bring to this discussion, okay? The trading rate, the rate at which homes are trading hands in Canada, okay, is decreased now for 4 consecutive months. Now, we would expect it to be decreasing, but it really is decreasing. It is not increasing. What happened in September was when you did a seasonal adjustment to Canadian real estate stats from the Canadian Real Estate Association on the calendar year that we have, the way that the days of the month roll out this year, it gave a small boost to September. That's what it is. It's also going to give a small boost to October. It's also going to give a small boost to October. It'll have nothing to do with reality, but when you are foolish enough to use a seasonal adjustment, because the Canadian Real Estate Association 2 years ago came back and said, oh, let's start looking at seasonally adjusted numbers, you're just simply ignorant to why they did it. Prices are going higher. I mean, that is lunacy. Okay, the way that we measure the housing market, prices peaked in May. Okay, they're now home buyers are now spending $30,000 less than what they were spending in May. I don't care what the Canadian Real Estate Association wants to tell everybody. Oh, let's look about 5 years ago. Let's look at 2 years ago. Let's look at 1 year. No. Let's be honest with the public. If home buyers have been spending less now for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 consecutive months, tell them the truth. We can understand if you want to brag about May and you want to get your sales commissions back in May, but if you're going to tell them the truth in May, then tell them the truth in October. I mean, we're already into November and prices and home buyers are spending even less. Okay? There's nothing wrong with simply telling the public that this is the way it is and letting them make an informed decision. We also have to take into consideration this year, Ali, is that anybody who tried to seasonally adjust numbers between March of 2020 and June of 2021, it just doesn't even make any logical sense because the market was shut down and then reopened. So you had compressed sales that were going to be recorded in the market. And then, through the multiplicity of sales, that compression will only be exacerbated months later, again, peaking in June of this year. So actually, the way that we measure housing market, Ali, we would actually be measuring June of this year against October of last year. And we would never, ever have done that before. Okay, so throughout the last 40 years, we would never have made that comparison. But guess what? The housing market was never locked out. Home buyers weren't locked out of the market effectively for 2 months. And then that sales compression and multiplicity of sales came into play. So that's why this is the first time where we're reading a June to October. And we know next year we won't be doing that again. We'll be going back to June, July-ish, sort of a measure. So how would we explain this to you, Ali? Well, we would tell you back in February of 2019, the housing market was at 10% slower than what it was a year before. We would have told you in July, the housing market had started to heat up again. The law of the multiplicity of sales started to work out again because it was now 6% busier. Then in February of 2020, right now a year after we recorded that 10% decrease, we would also honestly tell you, no, there's about 19% more purchases. The trading rate is increased by that amount. That's where your velocity in your housing market is. Then we would have said it's up to 22%. Then 39% in February of 2021. We would also tell you, to be honest, understand that is because of sales compression. The compression of a whole bunch of months into a fewer number of months out of necessity. You didn't hear once Nova Scotia say at any time over the last 2 years about sales compression. They didn't tell you that the records that are being recorded aren't really records because we compress sales from, for the sake of the argument, from 14 months into 12 months. They didn't tell you that, but it only makes logical sense. Canadians make a decision to buy a home a long, long time before they actually take action. They may need to sell their existing home. So if they have their existing home on the market, and if it sells, and then the next day your provincial government says, we're in a national lockdown. You can't go out and buy another home. Well, luckily the lockdown happened in March and April of this year. And since if you sold your house in December, January, you probably weren't going to close on it till June or July. In other words, you didn't have to move out till June or July. You weren't in any real pressure to buy a house in March and April when the market closed down. But when the market reopened in May, you were under pressure because you needed to find a house in the next 60 days or you would be homeless. This is where the problem is, Ali. This is where the problem is. Interest rate increases, okay? If you listen to earlier shows in House Street, we talked about the interest rate trap. And what that means is that if the Bank of Canada has interest rates rising, average house price declines, and the net wealth of the nation drops. As the net wealth of the nation drops, the economy slows. These are factual realities of any housing market. You have to understand the housing market in Canada is around $7 trillion. So when you hear about the Bank of Canada, everybody complaining about the Bank of Canada printing money, let's not forget the trillions of almost $2 trillion that the Canadian housing market has printed over since COVID started. It just makes the little tiny Bank of Canada's buyout look pale in comparison. Well, what happens if that wealth, which is being used to buy, cars? Aren't cars sold out? Renovation work on your house. Wasn't it hard to buy all the renovation supplies? I know we had a supply chain shortage months later, but how come you couldn't get them in May and June of 2020? You could understand it this year, but not May and June because they were already on shore. They'd already been shipped in. These are the realities of what happens with interest rate increase. But then you also have to understand, the way that we see it. I'm not saying, we're the only ones who see it this way, is that rates are not dictated by the Bank of Canada. They're dictated by the bond rating agency. And when the bond rating agency says the government of Canada is you can't get enough, interest on your Canadian debt, then people don't buy it. And then the Bank of Canada has no choice. They have to increase the interest that they're going to pay on that debt, which means that the interest rates of your mortgages go up. It's the bond rating agencies that decide. As the interest rates rise, the housing market slows. I've already told you in the previous section, or maybe it was this one, the housing market now been slowing now for this is the fourth consecutive month of a slowing housing market. And I would also say that when we take into sales compression into view, that it's really been slowing now for 8 months. So you're not going to hear Scotiabank say any of the things that I just told you. They are not going to supply you with any data point. They're going to supply you with statistics from the Real Estate Association of Canada, Canadian Real Estate Association, or your local real estate board, or your local realtor. They're not going to say, here's the data, this is the way we read it, this is what it says. Oh, and if you want to fact check us, this is the way you can fact check it. They're not going to do that. So what I would tell you is they're not lying to you. They are simply speaking from a place of ignorance to what they're talking to.
Another question from a listener. My mortgage is renewing in November, and we have an estimated 38% equity in our home. Should we go long or short term?
Okay, so I mean, your answer is going to be a couple of ways. 38% equity in your home. We don't know how long you've been in it. In other words, what trade was this? Have you been in this home? Was this your first home? And now you've paid down the mortgage to you're only at a 8% equity? Or is this more appropriate? You're probably in your second or third home, and now you've reached a 30% equity position. We would tell you is that we never believe in holding more than about 30% equity in your home. You should diversify your home equity the same way that any financial advisor tells you to diversify your investment. We understand that that's not possible because they want to get your money and use it for some other purpose so they can make some income from it. But these are still rules that everybody should follow. Now, in terms of long-term or short-term, well, that depends on who you are and what your job placement is. So if you've got a pretty secure job, say you're a government worker, okay, you're not worried about being laid off, well then you can go ahead and take short-term. You need to be calculating though. You need to be calculating what your estimated cost of interest is going to be over the remainder of your mortgage, because this is very important. A lot of 95%, 5% down home buyers, okay, they are in a better position to pay more money for a home with a lower interest rate on the mortgage than pay a lower price on a home that has a higher interest rate mortgage. Because the 25 years of mortgage carrying charges are going to be offset by the house price change. Now, it depends on the buyer. It depends on what their jobs are. Depends what their age is. Depends if they're going to take steps up the property ladder. All of those questions need to be discussed. And I will tell you, go out and try to find that information anywhere. It doesn't exist. How is it possible that the way that every Canadian family has navigated the property ladder in Canada for the last 70 years isn't published anywhere? How is that possible? Why does everybody get the same mortgage lending calculator? Why does everybody get the same gross debt service, total debt service ratios? Why is there not an individual calculation based on the province you're located in, the city you're located in? Why are not all these individually accounted for? Because they should. So what I would tell you is that you, at a 30% equity, whoopee-doo-dah, you don't have anything to worry about. If you've got a secure job, you can play the short game. If you or your spouse, so let me get this straight, if you or your spouse is risk averse, then you probably want to take a longer term mortgage. But you really need to know what your forecasted interest charge is going to be over the life of your mortgage. It's that number that every decision on a mortgage should be predicated on.
Ross, another question. My parents want us to buy a home, and they're offering to pay our 5% down payment plus closing costs. Could you read my mom and dad? Should we act now or wait until spring?
Okay, so first of all, you want to thank your parents, and you want to see if that's booked. So you got to say, look, if we put it off for a year, is this still going to be available to us? And your parents are probably going to tell you one way or the other. Also, I would tell you, probably after a year, you could save a lot of that down payment up yourself. Move back in with your parents. Maybe that would be a nice way to do it. Instead of paying rent somewhere, save that money for the down payment of your house. I mean, if you're going to enter the property ladder at $400,000 in a condo, that's $20,000 down, plus another $10,000 for closing, $30,000. If there's two of you, you should be able to save $30,000 in a year living at home. Biting the bullet, maybe taking the bus, not taking a trip down to Jamaica or something this winter, maybe not buying all the new clothes, maybe not getting the new cell phone. Those are all options that home buyers have made, concessions home buyers have made for 70 years. Should we act now or wait till the spring? This goes back. I suggest you listen to what we told the previous question and how we answered the previous question on the 38% equity question on a mortgage. Should they go long or short? Your answer is going to be the same. You need to calculate your net expense on owning a home over 25 years, your net cost over owning a home for 25 years. You have to see if that's going to go up or down, depending on the interest rate change and the house price change that comes with that interest rate change. Those things all need to be taken into consideration. And I will tell you, your situation is unique. Nobody will be the same as you. Your answer needs to be unique to you.
I heard a podcast where they claimed the Bank of Canada is lying, the big banks are lying, the governments are lying, but the only group they didn't say was lying about housing was realtors. Are we really being lied to, and can we trust realtors?
Okay, so first of all, lying implies, in my opinion, that you are willingly stating a mistruth, something that you know is not true. So what I'll tell you is that the Bank of Canada staff, the big bank economists, government, Minister of Finance, CMHC, all of those people really believe what they're saying is true, okay? They really believe house prices change in 31 days. They really believe it. So what I would tell them is this. And your realtors? Yeah, they believe it too. They really do believe it. Now, why they called out the Bank of Canada, the big banks and the government, I'm assuming who you were listening to must have been a realtor or worked for a realtor. Because why would they not throw everybody into the same classification? So here's what I'll tell you. If you go over to the Calgary Real Estate Board website right now, okay, nobody's going to tell you this, okay? But this is how simple it is, okay? A balanced acquisition mix in the city of Calgary today would produce an average selling price of $492,000. The average selling price with a perfectly balanced sales mix, purchase mix, acquisition mix in the city of Calgary would have produced a $492,000 average price. It would also have recorded a median price of $420,000. $420,000. Now, if you go to the Calgary Real Estate Board right now, you're going to see that their October numbers were very close to that. And when you look at their average price, they're in at $485,000 for October, and that's only what we're out by $7,000. The median price in the month of October was $438,000. So it's $18,000 more than what a balanced sales mix would have been reporting. But those two things are very close. Then if you also look, you will look at the sales increase year over year in October, for the month of October. And you'll see that's right around 450 extra sales. So there was 450 extra sales, give or take, in October 2021 versus October of 2020. Well, if you go back and look at September, you're going to see it's almost 450 extra sales. So the extra 450 steps being taken on the property ladder in September, the next group of buyers took the next step in October. So you should have seen almost the same 450 extra sales. This is how a one first-time buyer, one extra first-time buyer produces 5 extra total sales. It's how you get these huge run-up in sales totals from simply one first-time buyer entering the market. Now, if you check it, it would only make logical sense that if those buyers taking this next step 450 extra in September, that makes 450 extra in October, then the average price would have increased, which it did, because they're stepping up the property ladder. They're buying more expensive homes. So that's really what you have to understand. Whoever's telling you these, who's making these comments, criticizing the Bank of Canada, the big banks, the governments, should be criticizing the realtors, is because they just simply are ignorant to how a housing market works. I just told you precisely, for an entire huge city the size of Calgary, that the balanced purchase mix, the balance of an acquisition mix, was almost perfect in Calgary in October, because the average price equates to what the average price should have been if 20% of your sales were going to first-time buyers, 20% to second-time buyers, 20% to third-time buyers, 20% to fourth-time buyers, and 20% to fifth-time buyers, or the categories of homes those people normally buy. That's how easy housing markets are to understand, and how you get to understand how they're trying to fool you each month, because normally this perfection doesn't take place. And remember, if a month doesn't end or if your sales counts in a month don't end in a 0 or a 5, it's not going to be able to divide the houses by 5 that sold. You're going to have a point something. And go back and try to find as many housing markets as you can where the month ended on a 0 or a 5. And if it didn't end on a 0 and a 5, it is a impossibility that the sales mix was perfect. And even if it did end on a 0 and a 5, the perfection never happens. That's what you need to understand when you hear someone calling someone that they're lying instead of just attributing it to their ignorance. Look, they're simply ignorant to how a housing market functions. They believe organized real estate. They really, truly believe what they're saying. It's just that they don't understand what they're talking about.
Ross, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks for having me on, Jim.
My guest has been home ownership consultant Ross Kay from the wealthyhomeowner.ca, Canada's authority on home ownership. If you have any questions for Ross, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HouseStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HouseStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HouseStreet.com radio is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.